For the 1 year anniversary of Nintendo Switch 2, a lot of Nintendo YouTubers have come out trying to damage control it. We've already covered Arlo and Dreamcast Guy, and now it's time to react to DarkSydePhil. Let's have a look and see what Phil has to say about this console.
Ladies and gentlemen, today is June 5th, 2026, and you may not be aware, but that means that today is the 1 year anniversary of the release worldwide of a particular console, which I purchased at launch last year, called the Switch 2. This is it. And in 1 year, I have done some pretty good amounts of gaming on my Switch 2. I wasn't in first! And a good variety of content. What I would like to do in honor of the 1 year anniversary of the release of this console is talk about my history with the console, what I did in the last year, what I thought about particular games, what were exclusives and what weren't, what I thought about the controller and more, so that you can have an idea of if this is something that you should get for yourself. Because this actually was a big question about a year ago. If you guys remember, when the Switch 2 released in 2025, a lot of people were questioning whether the Switch 2 console was worth the $450 that Nintendo had priced it at.
And who were these people, Phil? Grifters? Come on. Nobody reputable was really freaking out about the price. It really was just something that people did for concern trolling purposes. It was just content.
Does this thing have enough of an advantage over the original Switch that you should run and buy it at launch?
Yes, absolutely. There were so many reasons to own a Switch 2 day one. It was absurd not to pick one up. You know, Mario Kart World alone was well worth the price of admission, but you also had all these other games, you know, games like Rune Factory, you had Hitman World of Assassination, you had Donkey Kong Bonanza coming out in July. Like, again, the entire first year of Switch 2 was absolutely stacked. But people like Phil just don't really want to admit that and will kind of bend over backwards to complain about the console.
And the hot question was, well, what games does it have, right? What differences are between the Switch 1 and Switch 2? Because for many years, people just wanted a Switch Pro. Like, no exaggeration, they were just like, hey, all we want is a Switch with a bigger screen, better graphics, better storage capacity, thumbsticks that don't drift, okay? All we want is these minor improvements, these little tweaks. Give us a Switch Pro. But then, they decided they're gonna make a Switch 2, okay? But now you're gonna charge us $450, which is way more than what the current pricing of the Switch was at the time.
Yeah, Phil, because it's brand new hardware. What are you talking about? Oh man, it's way more expensive than the Switch 1. Yeah. Like, just like every piece of new hardware ever, it's always going to be more expensive than the last piece of hardware.
And they would be pushing through and being like, hey, you know, here's the features of the console, etc. And if you remember the PR campaign that Nintendo had for the launch of the Switch 2, it was questionable. They were like, oh, so what's the difference between Switch 1 and Switch 2? Oh, well, there's going to be a webcam. What? Yeah, you can use it for voice chat and webcam capabilities. So now you can do it for social stuff. And there's going to be games where you're going to be able to put your face into this video screen in the corner of the screen. And you're going to be able to have face cam and communication with people over the internet. And everyone was like, we already have that.
Not on Switch. Yeah, this is like going to be a reoccurring cope in this video, is that whenever DSP talks about anything or brings anything up, like, one of the things he'll use to dismiss it is say that, like, well, other consoles can do that too, or I can get that on other platforms. And, like, he doesn't really consider the fact that, like, the fact that the Switch can do these things now too is kind of a benefit, that it proves that Nintendo is doing things that the other companies are doing, but better. You know, Xbox and PlayStation, if you think about it, they don't have an equivalent of that game chat Star Fox VTuber thing, right? Like, if you think about it, Nintendo already has a better voice chat system than any of them. But people like Phil are doing this thing where like, I think Discord's better. Like, it's not because it is. It's not because Discord is a superior service. It's just because it's the one that they're used to, and the one that they don't see a reason to move on from, which is a completely different issue. It has nothing to do with the Switch 2 not being good, essentially. Like, these people are just making excuses to be upset about it.
We have that on PC. We have it on other like it already exists. This isn't like you're not innovating something new. This is something that already is there. So, what I feel the major difference was between the launch of other Nintendo consoles and the Switch 2 was pretty simple. The Switch 2 did not innovate in any way whatsoever.
First of all, that's not true. And second of all, they didn't need to completely reinvent the wheel. The Switch 2 improved on the Switch 1 in all the ways that really matter. You know, it's more high quality, you know, better controller, better screen, better features, more storage capacity. But it also has a myriad of new features and improvements that make it better than the Switch 1. You know, the game chat, the webcam, the microphone. Like, there's so many things in the Switch 2 that are wholly unique to this console, but people like Phil are just dismissing because, like, well, it doesn't change my gameplay experience.
Okay? It didn't have an innovative touchscreen that it didn't have before. It didn't have motion controls. It wasn't storing things on tiny little discs. It didn't have a weird controller like the GameCube one that was supposed to stand out and be unique. You know what I'm saying? This guy is literally a Switch. Like, it is. It's a Switch. And if you look at it, it looks like a Switch. It plays like a Switch. There's nothing new to it whatsoever. And you have to understand that's a departure for Nintendo. Nintendo usually, whenever they launch a new console, they find a way to make it innovative, to make it feel like they're standing out from the pack, that they're not just Sony or Xbox or just another console manufacturer. The reason they're selling you a new console is because there's something innovative in it that you can't get with their previous console.
Like, a video game? What's he talking about? I think right now, the Switch 2's primary innovation is coming from its software lineup. You know, Mario Kart World innovated pretty heavily with like the free roam mode and like the parkour tricks and all that. And then you have Bonanza, which of course is wild and different. And, there's just been so many cases of that. Yoshi and the Mysterious Book is quite a bit different than other Yoshi games, right? Like, right now, they seem intent on like innovating when it comes to their IPs, not necessarily when it comes to their hardware. And that's something that like Phil is going to be like dismissive of throughout this video.
And even at times when it flopped, like for example, the Wii U. Yes, the Wii U did flop, but they did try to do something different by having the console also be a weird standoff controller with a screen in it. You know what I'm saying? Like, they did try. It failed, but they did try. I got the Switch 2 at launch. Well, just ignore me in the corner looking like an idiot. So here it is, from Walmart.com, delivery, pre-order date, my address, there it is, the Switch 2, order total, blah, blah, blah. Got it. Now it's, hey, I got 2 Switch 2s, what a great day, everything's amazing. And then I check my email, where it proceeds to tell me that both orders have been canceled. Does it say that it's because of an error on Walmart? No, it says, I canceled the orders. Someone socially engineered my account on Walmart.com, and through basically very basic information, which it must have been because it certainly wasn't anything crazy, they got access and canceled my orders. So now I don't have a Switch 2. Okay? And I paid full price, $450 for it. Then you scalp it. I was able to pre-order it and actually get it at launch. Now, when it arrived, to be honest, there wasn't a heck of a lot to do with it besides play the launch title, Mario Kart World.
Wow, there was nothing to do with the Switch 2 other than play its game. Wow, what a crazy observation. Oh, what am I going to do with this video game console? Oh no, the only thing I can possibly do is play a video game. What a complete joke. And by the way, Mario Kart World was not the only game to launch on day one. You know, there were plenty of other options. I picked up I believe 5 games. I want to say it was 3 or 5. I don't remember exactly, but yeah, I picked up several games, most of them good. Street Fighter 6 I'm still playing today. So DarkSydePhil he's just sitting there trying to act like, oh man, I paid for $500 for this just for Mario Kart World. And I'm just like, Mario Kart World is one of the biggest titles of that year. You know, it absolutely was a huge game. It was well worth the price of admission. And obviously, you're going to get new games later. So to me, this is just a complete non-issue.
Okay? Mario Kart World was sold for more money than any Nintendo game before. And I mean it. It was sold for an ultra premium price tag. Okay? $80. In a nutshell, Mario Kart World was a complete ripoff. I say that because Nintendo completely misadvertised it and said that it was something that it definitely was not in order to try to justify the increase in price tag.
What is this retard saying? The world is interconnected. It does have an open world mode. What's he saying? How did they misrepresent it? How did they lie about it during the advertising? There's nothing to say that, no.
In reality, the game never should have been sold for $80 because it doesn't have enough content to warrant an $80 price tag. In fact, once you actually get into the game, you realize it has less content than most other Mario Kart games before it.
That is not true. This has hundreds of hours of content, okay? You'll never really get bored playing Mario Kart World. Okay, I come back to it regularly. It's still a great game. There's still plenty of things I need to do in it. I've done everything in Grand Prix and Knockout Tour, but I have not done everything in Time Trial or the free roam mode. So there's still plenty of things for me to do. I would say it's going to take probably 100 hours to do everything, probably significantly more than that. But yeah, there's plenty of content in this game. To say that it doesn't have content is just objectively wrong, and really is something that I do think people need to call him out for. Because what do you mean by content? Do you mean tracks? Do you mean again, the tracks are designed to be endlessly replayable, right? Do you mean the different modes? There's plenty of different modes. Do you mean the online modes? There's plenty of features in this game. Again, the idea that this game doesn't have content, that it has significantly less content than other Mario Karts, that's very observably not true.
So Nintendo literally just wanted to rip off the customer and make more money at the launch of the Switch 2. So Mario Kart World came out and promised a huge open world, except the world was empty and had no reason to do any content in it. It didn't unlock anything. It was just there for the sake of being there.
What is this giant cope? This is a racing game. You're racing in the open world. I don't understand that, the idea that, everyone seems to think this should have been, a GTA game where you're going around, causing mayhem and, running people over and stuff like that. But, no, this is a racing game. You are racing in the open world. That is the content. That doesn't the whole idea that it's empty though. It's a racing game. You're supposed to be racing other people. The free roam mode is not the selling point of the game. This is something that Phil doesn't seem to understand, is that the world is interconnected. It is an open world, but you are primarily racing on it. That's the point. The issue with this is that Phil is complaining about Mario Kart World not being like Grand Theft Auto.
The people who actually like Mario Kart hated Mario Kart World because all the tracks were just straight lines. Because all the tracks connected, there was no circuits. And because there were no circuits, the game didn't feel like a real Mario Kart, and most people that like Mario Kart hated the game. In addition, the game...
Okay, this is actually why Phil is wrong. Okay, this is why you can't take him seriously. Like, he doesn't know what he's talking about. You can race on circuits. Okay, there are tracks in this game. The idea that like the intermissions are like the entire experience is just completely objectively wrong. Okay, you do have the intermission variations, right? You do have like the going from track to track, in the Grand Prix and all that. But what you also do have is the actual traditional track design. And this is a good example of how Mario Kart World in the Grand Prix alone actually has significantly more content than every other Mario game before it, in that every track has all sorts of variations because of this system.
The game was rife with item abuse, and it was more about learning how to get and implement the timing of items than it was actually driving.
Whoa, Phil, you mean like every single Mario Kart ever made?
So even if you were good at driving, it didn't matter. That's not what Mario Kart World was about. The game sucked. And they charged $80 for it as if it had more content when it actually literally had less than previous Mario Karts. So the game comes out as a huge ripoff, but most people are glazing it and kissing butt because, hey, it's the one game that I can actually play on my Switch too, so of course you're going to think or say it's good.
Nah, there were a ton of games day one on Switch 2. I was playing all sorts of things. Like, Phil is just complete coping. And by the way, even if this was the only game on Switch 2 day one, like, Bonanza came out in July, okay? Like, how long realistically would this cope have lasted, even if it was true? Like, I personally was playing all sorts of different things day one on this console, and I've been getting like consistent new releases since then. So I don't understand why Phil is so upset about how this game launched day and date on Switch 2.
So then Donkey Kong Bonanza comes out, and everyone is glazing this game too, saying it's game of the year. It's the best Donkey Kong game ever. It's better than Super Mario Odyssey.
Bullshit.
Donkey Kong Bonanza is a 4-hour game.
Huh? What? 4 hours? What are you talking about? That's not true. Like,
now, it's longer than that when you play it, but it actually is a 4-hour game.
so it's longer than 4 hours, but it secretly is a 4-hour game because you say it is? That's not how this works, Phil. You can't just decide how long a game actually is. Like, what is this? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
The initial 2 hours of the game introduces the destruction mechanic, which really is the only thing you end up doing in the game.
Wrong. Okay, so the destruction mechanic is a core integral part of Donkey Kong Bonanza, but as all the environments are wildly different and how you're constantly unlocking new bonanzas and new abilities and like learning new things about the world and like, collecting things, like the simple fact of the matter is, like, saying it's destroying things is like all you do in the game is like disingenuous, because you're going through completely different environments with completely different mechanics, with like completely different features, right? Like the idea that all you do is just mash Y and like break through bricks like it's like Minecraft or something, that's just not true. Okay. And it's like, it's kind of weird that he would even like try and say this, because anyone who's played the game will tell you, I'm not even the biggest fan of Bonanza. I think Tropical Freeze was way better, but like, this is just the argument doesn't make any sense. Like, he's not addressing the actual problems with Bonanza and the gameplay loop. He's just doing this thing where he's saying that, oh yeah, all you do is punch things, which is not true at all.
You break things, you punch through walls, you dig, you destroy things, and you find hidden items in the walls. That's the whole game. That's literally the whole game. Are there animal transformations? Yes. They're barely used in the game. There's very few times when you really need them, and even when you do, it's over within 5 to 10 minutes, and then you're back to just destroying everything in the game again.
Yeah, this is such an obvious cope. I don't even think I really need to point it out. Like, oh yeah, you don't really need the bonanzas, except when you do, it's just like, Phil, you're not making any sense.
So the gameplay loop is 2 hours of discovering how to creatively destroy everything, then about 15 hours of repetition that's insanely boring in the middle, and then the final 2 hours of the game, no exaggeration, is some of the most brilliant fan service game design I've ever seen. I'm purposefully not going to spoil the ending of Donkey Kong Bonanza, because if I did, it would actually ruin the game for those who would maybe want to play it in the future and haven't, or who are longtime fans of the Donkey Kong Country franchise. So all I'm going to say is, if this game was half and half, 2 hours from the intro and 2 hours at the end, and they cut the 15 hours out of the middle, they could have sold this game for $20, and it would have been a better game than the $70 game they gave you with 15 hours of filler in the middle.
No, Phil, nobody would have thought that. If they had done that, people would have been demanding like more of it and for it to be longer and for it to have more content. Like the fact that he's even making this argument is just, it's just absurd. It's ridiculous. Like I think Phil is full of shit. I think he doesn't know what he's talking about. I think he's a retard.
It's insanely repetitive and boring in the middle, and it sucks. So, again, another game overhyped because it was the only game out for this console at the time.
Wait a minute. How can you argue that Donkey Kong Bonanza is the only game on Switch 2 when you've already said that Mario Kart World was the only game on Switch 2? That's not how this works. Like, what are you talking about? Like, you can't just say that a game that comes out is the only game on Switch 2 when you've already established that another game has already come out on the console. Like, that's not how this works. You can't just say the Switch 2 has no games and then just turn around and say that, like, well, this doesn't count and this doesn't count and this doesn't matter. That's not how this works, okay? Like, you can't just say that, like, well, this is the only game they put out this month. Like, yeah, Phil, like, the console's brand new. They only need one major game a month.
So everyone ran and bought it and kissed its butt and glazed it, and in reality, it wasn't very good.
I hate to use this as a positive example, but when you have people like Arlo coming out and saying this is like one of the best Nintendo games ever made, you really do have to start acknowledging like the discrepancy. Okay, you can't just write off everyone else who's glazing this game as like one of the all-time GOATs just because you don't agree with it. Like for me personally, I feel very strongly about this, that Bonanza isn't that great. You know, I don't consider it one of the all-time great Nintendo launch games. I don't consider it my favorite Donkey Kong game. I don't particularly like it that much. I do think it's better than Mario Odyssey, but that's I didn't care for Odyssey at all. So like again, I actually kind of agree with Phil in the sense that like Donkey Kong Bonanza wasn't nearly as good as it's cracked up to be, but to say it's like not good at all and that it has no value and that like people are just glazing it for no reason is like disingenuous. Like for me, the reason I don't like Bonanza is that like I don't think it's as good as other games in the series. I specifically came out and said that I thought Donkey Kong 64 was better. I think I liked the character models better. I liked the environments more. I liked the gameplay loop better. I liked the variety. I liked the boss fights better. Like DK64 to me was just like this really great game. And for Bonanza to like take it in such a radically different direction, it wasn't something that like I particularly cared for, but that's just a personal opinion thing. And I feel like Phil just isn't really willing to admit that like certain people would get a lot of mileage out of Bonanza. And I think that's kind of my mindset when I look at this game and when I look at its success is that, you know, it's perfectly all right for people to like the game for what it is, even if it's not as good as other games in the series or as good as other games on Switch 2. Plenty of people still enjoy it, and that's fine. But Phil has to like present it in this way where like, oh man, it's the only game on Switch 2 and it wasn't very good, and like it just doesn't work that way. You can't just write off this game because like you thought the general gameplay wasn't as good as it could have been.
Super Mario Odyssey was leaps and bounds better than Donkey Kong Bonanza, but no one said that because they were so busy being Nintendo fanboys and only having 2 games to play on the console, they all had blinders on.
Yeah, Phil's projecting in a big way here because I remember his Mario Odyssey playthrough and how he struggled with that final area and how he just like used the frog glitch to like Phil's a little bitch, okay? Like what he's doing is basically doing the opposite of what like everyone he says everyone else is doing, is that he's glazing Odyssey in order to like downplay Bonanza. So he's just using Odyssey as a cudgel to go after Bonanza and to try and criticize it when like really the two games really don't have that much in common at all. And I just don't really see a point in like trying to prefer one or the other. I do like Bonanza more, but that's just my opinion. But that's something that like Phil would never like say, right? Like he would never say that like this is my opinion. He tries to portray this as if he's completely 100% right about this.
And couldn't see the forest for the trees. You know what I'm saying? Then I played Pokemon Legends ZA, and I played through the base game as well as the expansion DLC. This ended up being an incredibly long playthrough for me because my viewers really like Pokemon. And so we interacted a ton during this playthrough. We, enjoyed it. Now, here's the thing. The previous game, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, had been a Switch exclusive, and that game ran incredibly poorly. It was very low frame rate, it chugged along, had NPCs popping in and out. It was really, really bad. So when Pokemon Legends ZA came out on Switch 2, everyone said, hey, since this is on Switch 2 now, is it going to run better than Scarlet and Violet ran on the Switch 1? Will it be a better Pokemon experience? Well, I can answer this honestly. The answer is yes. It was a better graphical experience than I experienced with Pokemon Scarlet on the Switch. The frame rate was pretty consistent. The graphics themselves were, full HD. They were better. There wasn't slowdown. There was some pop-in, but they did something interesting and clever with Pokemon Legends ZA. The entire game was based within a city walls. So because of that, you never really had a large draw distance out into the background. So the game didn't have to render things too far away. Therefore, it avoided the problems that Pokemon Scarlet had, where things would pop in and look terrible or be low frame rate in the background. Instead, you never really saw things too far back. So because they did it that way, it was kind of a tricky way to disguise possibly the fact that there would have been graphical problems. And I'll just say that overall, my experience with Pokemon Legends ZA was a positive one. However, I didn't like the fact that the game is full on live action. While traditional Pokemon is turn-based and you can really plan out your moves and you can try to do status ailments and things and they matter, in Pokemon Legends ZA, everything's happening so fast and in real time, you don't really have time to plan. All you really do is mash. You mash out your most powerful attacks or the weaknesses of the opponent, and then you just move on. You don't really try to strategically do anything. Flip side of that is, I actually recently played Pokemon Fire Red, and that's a classic Pokemon game, and it's very strategic. So for me, I prefer the classic style, but hey, this is what they're doing with modern Pokemon, and it was a great playthrough that I experienced on the Switch 2, despite the fact it's not a Switch 2 exclusive. You could have played it on the original Switch. Then we have Metroid Prime 4. Oh boy. Oh my goodness. First of all, this game was caught in development hell for a long time, if you're not aware. Metroid Prime 4 was supposed to come out many, many years ago. And apparently the game was restarted at some point. And man, it shows. Because when you play Metroid Prime 4, immediately the game opens with the feeling that this isn't even Metroid Prime.
Okay, so this is my thing with DarkSydePhil's Metroid Prime coverage, is that he talks like he's a huge fan of the series, that he knows a lot about these games, but like he's never really played any of them. I don't know if he's ever finished one, but I believe he rage quit Metroid Prime Remastered as well. So like his entire like idea that he has that like, oh man, this is nothing like Metroid Prime, like, Phil, you don't know what Metroid Prime is. Like, you're not that familiar with this sub-series of Metroid. You're not familiar with, like, what they were trying to do with this game. Like, again, like, everything they did in this game makes perfect sense if you've been following along with it, with, like, Federation Force and, like, Prime 3 and all that. But, like, Phil has no idea what he's talking about. Like, he has this idea that he knows what Metroid is, but he's a filthy casual and doesn't actually play these games. So he doesn't actually understand what Metroid Prime actually is. What he does is that thing that people do, like, he thinks he knows what Metroid Prime is, and he's upset that this game is nothing like that.
Right? Samus is not isolated on a planet by herself like she usually is in a Metroid game. Instead, she's immediately crash landing and trying to help people who appear to be in the middle of a fight like it's the beginning of a Halo game.
More isolation. So you never played Metroid Prime 3, you never played Federation Force, you never even played Prime 2, because the only difference between Prime 2 and Prime 4, like structurally speaking, is that like Samus shows up before everyone dies. Okay? So it's a perfectly reasonable direction to take the series in. Like, there's nothing really all that odd about it. And like the sheer fact that Phil is like ranting and raving about this is just laughably stupid. Oh, by the way, yeah, it's not that different from Other M. So like the idea that like that Metroid has never had this situation before where Samus has been working directly with the Federation. It's just something that like no actual fan would say. It's something that posers say, essentially.
So it doesn't even feel like Metroid at all when the game starts. Then you immediately have to rescue and find a character who blabs all the time.
Doesn't happen. Miles doesn't talk that much. Like, again, it's like he's just repeating memes that he heard on Twitter without any regard to the context. Like the idea that like Miles talks incessantly was something that like came about like pre-release and is not actually true for the final product.
And that also throws you off because, again, typically a big part of the Metroid experience is isolation and the feeling of solo survival and exploration in this big world where you're like a lone survivor.
This has not been true in Metroid Prime since Metroid Prime 1, okay? Metroid Prime 2 had NPCs, it had dialogue, it had, a story, right? There were people living on Aether when you were there, right? And then Prime 3, of course, has like more NPCs and it has more variety. And you even get to see like one of the Federation occupied planets. And of course, like, Prime 4 went in the direction it did. So like this idea that like, oh man, like this is nothing like previous Metroid Prime games, like it doesn't hold up under any scrutiny at all.
And it's all taken away right away at the beginning. Then as you continue to play the game, it just doesn't feel like Metroid. It feels like a bunch of fans of Metroid tried to copy-paste what the previous teams had done making Metroid Prime games and failed. The controls are not nearly as good. In fact, they're quite wonky and not very specifically good, so you end up, a lot of the times, not being able to control the game very smoothly.
Yeah, this is a common complaint for people who have never played a Metroid Prime game before because they have this weird idea that Prime plays like a first-person shooter, and then they get upset that like it plays nothing like that. So it's very common for like people who don't know what they're talking about when it comes to these games to complain about the controls. But the thing that gets me about this is that he implies that like the older games control differently, when in actuality they did not. Okay, like this isn't all that different control-wise from Metroid Prime Remastered, okay? Like, I don't know if he actually makes the comparison to Metroid Prime Remastered in this video, but, like, again, they're not that different in my mind. Like, I look at Metroid Prime 4 and I look at, like, Prime Remastered, and I'm just like, how exactly are these controls, like, radically different from each other? Like, to me, I just don't see it. To me, it just feels as if he's, like, trying desperately to like justify his opinion and his hot take, but like it just doesn't hold up under any scrutiny whatsoever.
The gameplay elements aren't very interesting. The first two worlds are boring. The enemies are uninspired. There's just nothing too interesting about the game. And then you finally get to a unique boss and it starts spinning like a top, like you're fighting some cheesy Mega Man boss, and you're like, what am I playing? Dreidel, I made it out of clay. Who knew that Silex was Jewish? How do I fucking stop him from doing this? Look, he won't stop. He literally won't stop spinning.
So this kind of thing is pretty common in Metroid Prime, and anybody who's played these games in any reasonable capacity would have expected something like this. Like again, this is the thing with Metroid Prime, like posers or like tourists or whatever. They think these games are a lot more mature, sophisticated, and adult than they actually are, and they get put off by things like this that are clearly like gameplay focused and are pretty clearly rooted in like general Nintendo design philosophies. So like, because this is like, oh man, it's a boss fight. Oh man, real life doesn't have boss fights. Like Phil is just exposing himself as a tourist, essentially.
Like seriously, what in the holy hell is this game? This feels nothing like Metroid. After only playing Metroid Prime 4 for around 4 hours, I quit it. I couldn't stomach another minute of it. I was so bored that I just didn't want to play it anymore, and my entire audience agreed. Why are we continuing on with this game that's a shadow of what this series used to be, just for the sake of saying we're playing Metroid?
I mean, considering it's literally your job to play video games, Phil. Like, if anything, like I love how he does this thing where he's like, "Oh man, this is nowhere near as good as the older Metroid Primes." Yeah, the older Metroid Primes that he's never played. It's just the reality of it. Honestly, I think that's all this is that Metroid Prime was something that was put on a pedestal by people who never played it, and now that the series is back and that Nintendo's supporting it again, like the same people are now doing this thing where they're just like, oh wow, the series used to be so much better than this, guys, but like in reality it's not really that different. Like, I've long said that Metroid Prime 4, if anything, feels like a direct sequel to like Metroid Prime 2 with like, only you save the Federation this time. And for me, someone who was a longtime fan of the game, like this was like a really cool direction to take it. And I feel like it really does have this kind of somber tone to it. Like the ending is in particular is very, very moving. So like there are plenty of things I like about Metroid Prime 4 and like this idea that like, oh man, like why would I play this game? Or like because it's fun, because it's enjoyable. Like again, it just rubs me the wrong way whenever people like this like try and talk about Metroid Prime, because they always just expose themselves for not knowing what they're talking about.
We'll just go play better Metroid games that already exist and play this piece of crap. So we dumped it. And that was the third big Switch 2 exclusive for 2025.
That's not even true, by the way. Okay, first of all, it's not an exclusive. It is a Switch 1 game. The Switch 2 was an up-res. The fact that he doesn't know this kind of speaks volumes about him. Like, again, the sheer fact that, like, people like Phil tried to build this as, like, one of the biggest games on Switch 2 year one is just laughably stupid, because it was not an exclusive. It was not a high-selling franchise. And it wasn't that big of a deal. Okay, Metroid Prime 4 was never going to be a huge seller. Okay, it has nothing to do with the game's quality. Metroid is just fundamentally a niche Nintendo property. But yeah, he's ignoring everything that came out since. Okay, Kirby Air Riders in October, which was great, which was fantastic. Something that I think has really like grown on me over time. The more I play it, the more I experience it. It's really become like a real favorite of mine over time. So yeah, he straight up skipped Air Riders, which was fantastic and well worth the price of admission. An amazing game, great companion to Mario Kart, and he's also neglecting Hyrule Warriors: Age of Imprisonment, which was also a really good game with a surprisingly good story and great character moments. Like Age of Imprisonment, if you're a fan of Tears of the Kingdom, is a phenomenal experience, and I highly recommend it to anybody who hasn't checked it out. But again, this goes into what I've been saying about Switch 2 complainers for the longest time, is that like there are lots of games on this console, but what ends up happening inevitably for people like Phil is this idea that the only games that matter are the big AAA like Nintendo exclusives. Okay, like the games that are going to sell like upwards of 10 million units. Games that like feature Mario or Zelda and are just like, the huge like system seller games. Like someone like Phil would never play something like Air Riders, okay? Because in his eyes, Air Riders is just like derivative slop that doesn't really have a purpose, that's not really competitive, that's not really good, right? Like, he would never actually play something like it. And as a result of that, he has a completely warped idea of what the Switch 2 ecosystem looks like. Because I would say at this stage, a lot of the best games on Switch 2 are these lower budget games that Phil would never ever actually play. Like, again, like, one of my favorite games this year is Mario Tennis Fever. Like, not only would Phil never play it, he would probably like shit talk it and disrespect it if it ever came up, because like, oh, it's just tennis, like, with no regard to like the actual quality of the game itself. And we would probably see that with like Yoshi and the Mysterious Book and like, you know, Star Fox when that comes out, or Splatoon Raiders. Like, again, that seems to be the trend right now, honestly, is that these lower budget Nintendo games are the ones where like they're really experimenting and innovating and doing cool stuff with, but like someone like Phil would never respect that.
Miserable failures. Mario Kart World, Donkey Kong Bonanza, and Metroid Prime 4, all three games that were supposed to be the system sellers for this guy, were inferior games to anything Nintendo had put out before in those franchises.
Saying Bonanza and Mario Kart World are the worst entries in their respective franchises is a stretch. Like, are you really saying that Mario Kart World is worse than like Super Circuit or Mario Kart Wii? Okay, are you saying Bonanza is worse than like, I don't know, DK Jungle Climber or like Mario versus Donkey Kong? Okay, like, what are you talking about? The worst entries in their respective franchises? Like, I would argue Bonanza doesn't even qualify as a Donkey Kong Country game. Like, it feels like a completely new sub-series that has a completely different direction that just features Donkey Kong. Like, I wouldn't call Bonanza like Donkey Kong Country 4 or even Donkey Kong 64 2. Like, again, it feels like its own wild thing. So, like, to say that it's worse than previous Donkey Kong games, all previous Donkey Kong games, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, it's just a gigantic cope.
So, what do you need a Switch 2 for?
The fact that Phil even has to ask this question is just laughably stupid. Like, yes, Phil, you buy a Switch 2 to play video games. Not just Switch 2 exclusives, not just Nintendo first-party titles. You can play whatever is available on this console, okay? It can be Nintendo classics. It can be Switch 1 games. It can be, like, anything you want, okay? Third-party games. Like, there were a ton of options on this console day one, and you just tried to imply that there are only 3 games on the platform and all 3 of them are bad. And by the way, I love how he says this is like a look at like the first year of Switch 2, but he really only goes up to November. And of course, this console came out in June. So what he tries to do, he tries to say that this is a review of the Switch 2's first year, but he stops in December, doesn't cover anything that happened after that, and is going to go on and refuse to acknowledge the fact that we're in E3 season, we're in major announcement season, and that we're going to get major announcements for Switch 2 very, very soon. Like, this entire video just seems like tone deaf. Like, he doesn't know where things are going to go from here.
Continuing into this year, we had the launch of the Virtual Boy. Oh, now I can do a butt slam as well. Since I got the power up, I can do a butt slam. I just hit the question mark block that was in the ground, and there was a coin with a crown on it. Now there's a bee in the background. It came to the... Oh, it's not a bee. It's a... Oh! Oh, no. So there was a bat that came to the foreground, dropped something on my head. I lost my power up, and I've shrunk. I'm now like little Mario. This is crazy. Which really wasn't a Virtual Boy. It was just a plastic stand into which you put your Switch 2, and it would play Virtual Boy games with a simulated 3D effect. Now, I did actually get it. I did actually test it, and the games actually worked well. They did. And I actually enjoyed playing like Wario Land and a couple other games. So if you want the experience of actually owning a Virtual Boy in the 1990s, then by all means, buy this $100 plastic stand with 2 lenses on it, stick your Switch 2 into it, and enjoy, but you can only get the experience for yourself. If you actually want to play these games and capture them and share them, you have to play them emulated on the internet, which you can do for free right now. Continuing on, the next game I played was Pokemon Fire Red. Yeah, Pokemon Fire Red, the game from like 2004 that was a Game Boy Advance game, so they sold it on Switch 2 as a $20 game. To be fair, it ran well. I actually really enjoyed my time with it. But did it have any additional features? Did it have any added content? Did it have anything to warrant a $20 price tag when Nintendo already has an online subscription service called Nintendo Switch Online where you get a library of games for free every month?
Plenty of other publishers released their games simultaneously on Nintendo Classics and on the eShop. And in fact, that's actually been something that a lot of people have been complaining about, is that like, oh, I don't want to pay the subscription service. I want to just own the game. But again, when Nintendo actually released a Pokemon game with this format, of course, you're going to see people like Phil complain. Like, again, they're going to complain no matter what happens, no matter what the price point is, no matter what it's attached to. Like, they're just going to incessantly complain about the product. And there's actually a reason they had to do it this way, because they wanted to, like, they did, in fact, incorporate a method to transfer your Pokemon from this game into Pokemon Home, which would not have been possible on the original version if it was just emulated through the Nintendo Classic service. So this re-release does indeed have a practical purpose that hardcore fans would appreciate, and it's not really something that, like, you really should be criticizing anyway. You're complaining about a game costing $20, okay? Like, at its core. A game that, like, you know, I put like about 35 hours into now, probably will put like another several dozen hours into. But, like, you know, I love Fire Red. So the fact that he's complaining about something so innocuous is just pathetic.
No. It was a blatant attempt of Nintendo to nickel and dime their customer base and say, hey, we know you probably already have a Nintendo Switch Online account, but we're not going to give you this game on there. Pay us $20 for it instead. And I can totally understand why there's people who would be like, why would I pay more? You should just put it in the existing library of games. They should have. Nintendo, once again, just like when they were charging $10 extra for Mario Kart World for absolutely no reason, we're now charging $20 for a game they easily could have just slipped into their existing online catalog, but they wanted more money. The next game that I've played on Switch 2 is called Pokemon Champions. This is a free-to-play game that has a gacha mechanic. This game, essentially, is an online multiplayer-only game. There is no exploration. There is no story. There's no towns. All you do is go into the game and pull Pokemon from a Pokemon ranch. You then select which ones you want for your team. You can train them up by using the in-game currency that you earn by playing to unlock movesets and, you know, equip them to the Pokemon. And then you have a team that you take online and you duel against other people. If you win, you gain experience and currency. If you lose, well, you lose the experience, and you got to try to redouble your efforts and win matches so that you can actually get a win streak and get more currency. Ultimately, it's all about continuously pulling Pokemon to add to your team, trying to find the best builds, and then getting to the higher level tiers of the game, the higher level leagues, per se. So I just recently got into it. It's not super complicated, and it's actually kind of fun if you only care about the dueling, and it's kind of suspenseful to see if someone steamrolls you, you steamroll them, or it's a really tough match and it goes back and forth. Ultimately, is it an important game? Not really, but it's kind of a fun one, and hey, out of all the games that I just mentioned, it's the only one that's not an outright ripoff because it's free, and so far in my experience, you don't have to spend $1 on it. You can, but if you don't, you could still play, you could still draw Pokemon, you can actually bring Pokemon in from Pokemon Home, which I guess is the app that carries Pokemon between all the various different Pokemon games. So you can import your favorite Pokemon from your other Pokemon experiences to get them in there. It's really not that big of a deal. So, no exaggeration, outside of a few more retro games that I played on Nintendo Switch Online, that's all I've played on my Switch 2 in a whole year.
Phil, that says more about you than it says about the Switch 2. Okay, you didn't try to play third-party games on it. You didn't try to play, like, older games. You didn't try to, like, branch out and try something different. You know, like I said, you didn't even try, like, Kirby Air Riders or Hyrule Warriors, okay? Like, there have been plenty of games to play on this thing, and there's plenty of things to look forward to in the immediate future. So, like, this idea that, like, oh, that's all they put out, that's all I played, like, Phil, that says more about you than it says about the Switch 2.
Hasn't been another big exclusive since then, and there has been no real reason to play this besides Pokemon games that I could have been playing on my regular Switch anyway.
Wait a minute, I just realized this motherfucker hasn't played Pokopia. The biggest Switch 2 game of the year so far. This huge cultural thing, this huge hit that really drove sales in March and I think even today. This huge success story. He's just going to completely glaze over one of the most popular games of the year in order to push this narrative that Nintendo Switch 2 isn't worth owning. What a fucking retard. What a complete dipshit. Come on.
So, in reality, 1 year in, is there a reason to have a Switch 2? Well, unless you want one of the 3 console exclusives I just mentioned, or unless you're looking for the absolute best graphical performance on a game that performed poorly on the Switch, the answer is probably no. But I do think that there is an audience that would really appreciate this. For example, Pokemon fans who really were disappointed by the performance of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet on the Switch 1 have said this is the ideal way to experience the game, and they feel like that's how it should have been at launch. Now, I know that I've been very critical of the Switch 2. There is one positive thing that I would like to say, overwhelmingly positive, that I feel should be called out. The Joy-Cons are pretty good. I remember on the Switch 1, playing on the Joy-Cons was kind of a nightmare. And what I mean by that is they had stick drift, they had problems, they were quite frustrating to use, and quite honestly, they just weren't a good controller. The Joy-Cons were made as a weird motion control hybrid, but you could use it as a normal controller. If you use that plastic piece, you snap them together, it becomes like a normal controller. But the Joy-Cons never really controlled well and never felt satisfying. I mean, they don't even have a D-pad or anything. I played all of the first 3 games, including Mario Kart World, Donkey Kong Bonanza, and Metroid Prime 4 with these Joy-Cons, and they worked absolutely fine. They're actually quite good as a controller this time around, and I never experienced stick drift or any problems, and I played through, those entire first 2 games, no issue. However, there is one thing I absolutely have to call out, which is an absolute joke. Nintendo says that the Switch 2 has the capability of being a mouse. That you can take this Joy-Con and you can put it down on a flat surface and it has a light sensor on it or whatever it may be, and you can move around and use it as a mouse. Well, yeah, technically that's true, but I tried doing this in multiple games, notably Metroid Prime 4. It's absolutely terrible. It's incredibly inaccurate. It doesn't really move at the speed you would want a mouse to move. It's either way too slow or way too fast, and it's just not viable for aiming. Just using the Joy-Cons as a normal controller is infinitely better than trying to use this as a mouse. In fact, the one game that you would feel like you would want to use this as a mouse in, Mario Paint, which they did release on Nintendo Switch Online, is incredibly hard to play with this as a mouse. The original mouse for the SNES back in the 1990s was better than this as a mouse in 2026. So, the 2 things that Nintendo said were innovative about the Switch 2, the webcam and voice capabilities so you could do social, stuff with people over the internet, and this being a mouse, are both ridiculous. They don't innovate. It's not anything new. There is literally nothing new whatsoever about the Switch 2, besides the fact that it's a bigger screen, it's got slightly better graphics, and it has a few console exclusives. A year later, is it worth $450? Only if you wish to play one of the 3 big exclusives that I mentioned already are kind of crappy, or if you want the best graphical experience on a game like Pokemon Scarlet Violet. Outside of that, I really couldn't recommend it or tell you why it's worth $450, because it's not. Most of the games that I played and enjoyed, like Pokemon Legends ZA or Pokemon Fire Red, I could have just played on a regular Switch. I didn't need this guy for it. Oh, and by the way, even though I did just praise the Joy-Cons, yeah, I caved, and eventually I bought a third-party controller from PowerA that actually, in my opinion, controls better than the Joy-Cons. Even though the Joy-Cons are fine and I played entire games with them, I'm much easier to just jump into using a normal controller like this, which is only like $30 or $40 online, and it just feels a hell of a lot better than using those Joy-Cons. So ultimately, the one thing about it that I praised, I already replaced, so it's not really that big of a deal. What's coming out for Switch 2 soon that we need it for? Star Fox? Well, that's a remake. It may be great, but it's still a remake. Splatoon? Outside of that, is there a major Mario game coming out anytime soon? What about a Zelda? What about anything that's a notable game? Nothing. However, as of now, there's really no reason to have this right now. Duskblood, someone just said. We don't even know when that's coming out. Yeah, I want to play Duskblood just like you guys, but we don't have any clue when it's coming out. So, a year in, and everyone's shrugging, what do I do with this console? It's a good question.
Phil. They could drop a Nintendo Direct at any time and reveal new games. Like, I don't understand what he's talking about. Like, we literally very well may get a Direct this week. Okay? You know, all the signs seem to be pointing to it. So, like, the fact that he's choosing now to complain about a lack of new announcements is just insane. By the way, Duskblood's E is confirmed to be coming out this year, I think. So this entire cope he has, like, oh, I don't know when it's coming out, guys. I'm looking forward to it, but I don't know. Like, they can reveal information about it whenever. And the simple fact that that exists, that really does debunk this entire video. Because, like, the entire time he's just sitting there doing this thing like, oh, man, there's nothing I'm interested in. Everything is slop. There's nothing on the horizon. There's nothing to look forward to. And then someone just casually just goes like, what about Duskbloods, though? And then he gets defensive. Like, oh, we don't know when that's coming out. Like, come on. Come on, you absolute degenerate. And the fact that he had to just straight up ignore Yoshi and Pokopia, which are two of the best games on the console right now, and also Tamagotchi too on top of that. Like, again, there have been plenty of major releases this year that Phil just kind of like glazed over, right? Like, he tried to make it sound like the only things Nintendo did this year was release the Virtual Boy and release Pokemon Champions and Pokemon Fire Red. Like, he just completely glazed over the first half of this year, and it really makes this video look extremely misleading. It is ridiculous, like, how many games he skipped and how much he's ignoring and how he's still trying to say this console has no games. And it's even worse when you take into consideration, like, how he's straight up telling people that, like, well, there's nothing on the horizon though either. Like, I think that in and of itself kind of demonstrates his mindset. Like, the fact of the matter is, we already know about Duskbloods. We know it's coming. We know it's an exclusive. And yet, like, someone like Phil, who supposedly really loves Elden Ring and really loves FromSlop games, like, he can't even be bothered to pretend to be excited about it. Like, he has to, like, defend his position. He has to say that, like, well, we don't know when that's coming out. Like, bro, I've never seen him do this for any other game ever, okay? Like, again, we just saw people glaze Elden Ring, call it one of the greatest games ever made, FromSlop, one of the best developers in the industry, and the instant they announce a Nintendo exclusive, you just hear crickets from this community. Okay, it's positively disgusting. So anyway, let me know what you think about the video. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Be sure to support my Patreon. Be sure to buy my books, and I will see you all next time. Thank you for your support.